Hi, this is Patrick from JDM Gems. Today we're going to be working on this 1989 Honda Acty. The issue is after about 30 seconds of running, it starts to bog and die out. So we're going to be replacing the carburetor, since we believe that is what the issue is. This process is pretty simple. I'm going to be showing you step by step of how to get it done. The tools we're going to be needing is a 12mm combination wrench, a Phillips screwdriver, a ratchet with a 14 and a 10, and needle nose pliers. So first step is we're going to be removing the air hose right here. And just put it off to the side. Okay. Next we're going to be removing the 3 Phillips head screws on top of this cover. For the next step we're going to be removing the vacuum hoses that lead into the carburetor. So we're going to remove it from here. Just be very careful, this is a plastic fitting. There's one. And there's another one that leads right here. Let's just move it out of the way. All right. Next, we're just going to slide this cover off. For the next part, we're going to be removing these 2 coolant hoses. I'm just going to use these needle nose pliers to take this off. And just give them a little twist. And they should slide off. Okay. For the next step, we're going to be taking the throttle cable assembly off. So we're going to put this all the way to maximum position. And just slide the cable out like so. And then we're going to loosen this mount. And then you're going to loosen the bolt all the way until it goes after the part with no threads. And then you can just push this line back. I gotta undo that part first, and then it'll slide out. Next, we're gonna be removing the fuel hose. It's this red hose that goes right here. There's usually a little clamp. I'll say 9 times out of 10, this hose deteriorates or rips after you try to pull it off, so be ready to replace this. Luckily it came off in one piece, but sometimes these get frayed, but it's just a cheap fuel hose anyways. Next we're just going to be removing this Phillips head right here. This connects to the air box. And if it's possible, try to slide it off. Sometimes you might have to loosen some other things, but let's see if we can get this off. And I think we'll have enough room to work with here. So next, an air hose is right here. You can see there's a little clamp. This goes into one of those solenoids that always breaks. Just move like that. And just twist like the other ones, and it should slide off. So next we're going to be removing the 2 mounting bolts for the carburetor. It's just 2 12s. The one down here is very hard to reach to, so I'll do that one first. Oh man, it fell down. Let me get it. Next we're going to remove this 12mm top of the carburetor. So next we're going to be removing these 2 connectors. It's just simply a male and female plug. Nothing too complicated. Okay? Okay. Next we're going to remove this vacuum hose that's plugged onto this air intake. So we're just going to remove it like so. So I figured it'd be easier to remove the air intake tube. So there's a 10mm right here. Okay. And then we'll just pop this hose out. And then hopefully this tube will slide out, we'll see. And as you can see, it's out of the way enough. It's not fully off of here, but it's off the carburetor completely, so we'll just leave it like that. So before we try yanking the carburetor off, there's a harness that's clipped in right here. We're just gonna simply pull up on it and get it unloosened. You can see now it's not in the little clip. And now I can start moving the carb out of the way. So it's going to have a bunch of hoses and wires still holding it together. And we're just gonna start taking it off as we go. So you can see right here, already where my right hand is, there's a vacuum into this clip. So we're just gonna unclip that. And then right here on my left hand, there's wires, 2 wires for the solenoids that have just little clips. And so we'll just unclip them like that and shove them back out of the way. Okay. So now both those wires are out of the way. And before we lose or break the spacer, I'm just gonna take this out. All right, you can see there's a little gasket here. Just be very careful with it. Put that aside. And then we'll slowly start taking the carburetor out. You can see a bunch of different hoses still attached on the bottom. We'll try to remember where these go. I'm gonna take a picture before I start removing it out, just so I know where all these go, which orientation, how they're set up, because this is one of the most difficult parts of this setup, is putting everything back together the way you found it. One thing I do want to mention is this vacuum hose in particular is into a plastic fitting, so this is going to be very brittle. I would almost suggest just cutting it and getting a completely new vacuum hose. This one is just into another plastic fitting, but at least it's just a T instead of this is like an actual metal fitting. It's almost like a sensor right here, so just be very careful with this one in particular. So first we'll remove this. Just carefully twist back and forth. Again, if this one breaks, it's not too big of a deal. You can just get a new one. Finally. Next we're going to be removing this vacuum hose. Now again, to be very careful, go back and forth and just start sliding up. There's no nipple on this, so as soon as it breaks free, it should just slide up like so. And then next we're going to be removing this one that leads right into the carburetor. Again, plastic nipple or plastic fitting, so be very careful. Just go back and forth until it slides off. Like that. So now we'll start pulling up on the carb and see where else we're snagging. There's a hose right here. It's all the way back into the air box. We'll see if there's anything else though. Okay, so you can see it's really just that vacuum hose right there that's holding us from taking out completely. And if you see, it's right here. Almost looks like an evap canister, but I'm not too sure what that is, to be honest. However, there's a sort of junction right here. For ease, I'm going to be removing it here instead of back there, since I can do it over the car. Alright, now the carb should be 100% free. So before we continue, I'm just going to shove this paper towel in here just so nothing gets in here, no bugs or nuts or bolts, so we'll just keep the engine safe. Okay, before I put the carburetor on, I just like to take the bowl off and just kind of check the condition of the insides, just because I don't know how long this has been sitting. And this carburetor is from '89, looks fairly new, so who knows if it's gunked up inside or not. Just because it looks nice on the outside doesn't mean it's nice on the inside. Alright, it's just those 3 screws. And then this pulls up. out. And the inside looks fairly nice. You would notice a lot of deposits kind of like right here, but it'll be all on the bottom of the bowl. And the needles are fairly clean. So I would say this will be ready to put on like this. If you do notice any tarnishing, you would want to take this entire piece apart and kind of clean everything. However, I'm not going to go through that since this is a perfectly nice looking carb. So we'll just put it back together. So now we have bottom of both carbs. We're going to be swapping all the hoses and such and cover from this carb to this carb. And we'll start by removing the Phillips heads on the bottom. Hopefully they don't strip. Okay, so on the bottom they have 8mm heads. In this particular case, I'm going to take this T off. Oh, there we go. So now just make sure you got all the bolts on the bottom off. Looks like there was only 2. And we're just going to be tucking the vacuum hoses through it. Again, I'm going to take a picture of how these vacuum hoses run. So first, take this hose off for the gas line. There's a little bushing that kind of holds it in place. And we'll start kind of prying up and see how far we can get up. Those out the way. Okay. I'll take this off. Alright, now that you have this open, I'm going to take another picture to see where all the vacuum hoses go to. Now we're going to be removing the fuel hose. Okay, and just put it on the new carb. Alright. And then get the clamp on there. Perfect. Next, I'm going to be removing each hose individually and just putting them onto the new carb so I know exactly where they are going to go. I'm going to start with this one. Okay. And I'll just put it on a new one. Okay. So we still have on the old carb 2 hoses. I'll just transfer them later on. First, I'm going to focus on getting the bottom cover back onto the new carb, so we'll be ready to get it in the car. So we're going to start tucking these hoses back through here, just slowly getting the cover back on. As I'm doing this, I'll just be checking, make sure none of them are getting caught or tangled or kinked. And just slowly do this, just also making sure none of them pop out. So we're still about 5mm off. Curious to see. Try to look for any sort of kinks or anything in there that could be holding you back. But in the meantime, I'm going to be putting this little bushing back on for the fuel hose. Okay. And that's pretty close. So now I'm going to start putting these screws back on. Snug it down with an 8mm. Okay, now we should be ready to put back in. Let me just see if I need to put these in place. Okay, should be good to go. Okay, next I'm going to be removing some of the built up coolant that's just sitting on top of this block. Don't need to go crazy. If you want, you can engine degrease it, but I'm not going to. And make sure you have your little gaskets on both sides here before we slide this on. Just gonna snake this guy back in. Next, we're going to be checking to make sure all the vacuum hoses are able to reach where they were connected before. This one in particular, it curves. You want to make sure it gets on that little plastic piece. And there's one right here, you want to make sure it gets into there. These two electrical connectors, and then of course this red one. You would hate to put the carburetor on just to find out they have to take it back off to stretch out a hose or whatever. So now that we know that it's going to mount back up, we're just going to put the two 12 mils here. Just get the carburetor mounted. Alright, next up I'm going to start just putting the vacuum hoses back where they found them. Okay. We'll just be popping this wire harness into this clip. Like that. And then this red hose. Okay, just shove that down there for now. So now I'll just connect these solenoid clips back in. And then we're putting the vacuum hoses back on from the top. Now the coolant hoses. Now we'll get the air pipe back on and just get the red hose on the air pipe. So we'll go from right here. I just need a 10 mil and then just tighten that up. Alright, while I was down there I got the air solenoid hose on, so I'm just going to get this clamp right on there, like so, and the fuel line. Make sure the fuel line's fully seated with the clamp around it. Okay, so before we put the cover on, I'm just going to be putting this throttle cable back into place. Alright, and we'll try to put it right back where we found it. You can see by where the clean threads are that that's where the bolts are going to stay. Okay, now put the cover on. Before we start, we're just going to let the fuel pump prime a little bit. And then we'll try starting it. So now that we're finished, you want to make sure the car is running for at least a good 5 minutes. Get the temperature up so that the coolant has ran through the carburetor, and you can hear the idle go down. And if it goes too low, then we might have to adjust the carburetor. However, in our particular application, the carburetor ran perfectly fine. We didn't have to mess with anything. So overall, it's just a successful exchange. I do want to show a difference between the non-AC and an AC model carb. The difference is the solenoid here. You can see there's an empty spot here, and this is the solenoid. So the solenoid controls the idle raise whenever you click that AC button. If you do have an AC model truck and you're replacing the carb, make sure to get a carburetor with rather the solenoid, or be prepared to have to remove it using these 2 bolts along with this little mechanism right back here. If you do happen to have an AC model truck, you're gonna have to do it a little bit different if you buy a non-AC model carb. Other than that, the swap was very straightforward. Just a bunch of vacuum hoses on the bottom, and then obviously the 2 solenoids on the side. Also, another thing to note, make sure the solenoids aren't cut. The new solenoid had a cut wire here, so we just cut the one off this one and soldered it onto the new one. I didn't show you that because usually you wouldn't have to deal with that. It's just something that happens, I guess, in shipping. It looks like it just tore off. Anyways, if this video helped, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next repair. Okay, so a little bit tight. Just use the 10 mils. I was wrong, it's an 8 mil. And if this video helped, like and subscribe. And if this video helped, like and subscribe. You don't have to record this. Okay, record it, whatever. Record my pain. I guess we're done, that's it.